Step aside, now. You don't belong here. Maya froze, her hand clutching her bag, as the officer's fist swung, not at a threat, but at her. Pain exploded across her cheek, humiliation sharper than the blow itself. Phones lifted, cameras rolling, and the crowd gasped in disbelief. No one intervened, and then a shadow fell across the street, a presence strong enough to change everything. This is the story of a nurse struck by prejudice, until her brother arrived and turned the tables on hate. Comment your city below if you're watching this unfold. By all accounts, Maya Thompson lived a life of quiet strength. At 32, she had already seen more than her share of heartbreak inside the hospital walls where she worked. As a nurse, her days were filled with rushing to emergencies, holding trembling hands and offering calm in the storm of sickness. She had a way of making patients feel seen, not just treated. A rare gift in a world that often reduced people to charts and numbers. To her colleagues, she was dependable. To her patients, she was hope. And to her family, she was the glue that held everyone together. Maya's world revolved around care. Every morning she walked to the same bus stop, coffee in one hand, stethoscope in her bag, her smile ready to face whatever awaited her in the ward. She had built a rhythm, a sense of stability that gave her life meaning. But underneath that routine was something she rarely spoke of. The constant pressure of being a black woman in a system that often looked at her skin before it saw her skill. She had learned to push forward, to rise above, to carry herself with dignity, no matter the stares, the whispers, the subtle cuts of prejudice that followed her through life. Still, she held on to her dream, making her late mother proud by being the kind of nurse who healed not just bodies, but spirits. Her brother Jordan was her anchor. While Maya was gentle, Jordan was fire. A former Marine turned community mentor, he carried himself with the unshakable presence of someone who had seen the worst of humanity, yet refused to let it define him. Whenever Maya felt the world weighing her down, Jordan was the one who reminded her that she was more than the insults, more than the stares. He had her back, always. Their bond was unbreakable, a promise made the day they buried their mother that they would protect each other at all costs. Life had taught them resilience, but it had also taught them caution. They knew the world wasn't always safe, especially for people who looked like them. Still, Maya tried to believe in goodness. She tried to believe that compassion could be stronger than hate, and most days it worked. Most days her kindness disarmed the rough edges of the world. Most days her smile carried her further than anger ever could, but the cracks were there, waiting. The city they lived in was no stranger to racial tension. Headlines told of protests, of police misconduct, of lives taken too soon. The streets carried whispers of stories people wanted to forget, but couldn't. Maya read them, heard them, but never thought she would be the center of one. She believed her uniform protected her, that her role as a healer would shield her from harm. But fate had other plans. Because on an ordinary afternoon, when Maya stepped outside the hospital still wearing her scrubs, the world would remind her, brutally, that no amount of kindness could stop hatred once it decided to strike. The air outside the hospital was heavy with late afternoon heat, the kind that made tempers rise and patience thin. Maya had just clocked out, her scrubs still faintly stained from the long day, her bag slung over her shoulder. She was exhausted, but it was the kind of exhaustion she didn't mind, earned through saving lives. The city street hummed with traffic, the chatter of people, the occasional wail of a distant siren. For Maya, it was background noise, a rhythm she'd grown used to, but she didn't notice the way one set of eyes locked onto her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Officer Grant. To the world, he was just another uniform on patrol. To those who had crossed paths with him, he was a man whose authority was sharpened into cruelty whenever he spotted weakness or difference. And on this day, his gaze narrowed on Maya, not seeing a nurse who had just spent 12 hours healing others, but only a black woman standing in public. At first, it was subtle. He slowed his pace as she passed, his stare lingering longer than necessary. Maya felt it, like a cold draft across her skin, but she pushed forward, clutching her bag tighter. She had learned not to react, not to give strangers the satisfaction of knowing they'd unsettled her. But the sound of heavy boots followed, louder with each step. "Hey!" The bark of his voice cut through the air. People turned. Maya froze, confusion etching across her face. She turned slowly, her heart quickening. "Yes?" she asked cautiously. But there was no answer to her question, only the accusing eyes of a man who had already decided she didn't belong. Grant closed the distance in seconds, towering over her, his hand twitching near his belt as if ready for confrontation. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Maya blinked, stunned. "I just left work. I'm a nurse at the hospital." But he wasn't listening. The uniform gave him permission, in his mind, to twist reality into whatever story fit his prejudice. His voice rose louder now, sharp enough for passers-by to hear. "Don't lie to me. I saw you. You're loitering, causing trouble." Her throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to show him her hospital badge still clipped to her scrubs, but his words drowned her out. He shoved her shoulder, the force sending her a step back. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted as bystanders began recording. "Stop resisting," he barked, though she hadn't moved except to steady herself. And then it happened. His fist lashed out, striking her across the face. The world slowed. The sound of the impact cracked through the air, louder than the city noise, louder than the murmurs of disbelief around them. Maya stumbled, her vision blurring, her bag slipping to the ground. Pain flared, but worse than the pain was the humiliation. A nurse, a healer, a woman who spent her life protecting others, reduced to a target in the middle of a public street. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in outrage, others screamed. Yet no one dared step closer, not with the badge and the gun in plain sight. Grant straightened, chest puffed, as if proud of what he'd done. Maya's knees wobbled, her breath ragged. She thought of her patients, of the children she'd comforted, the elderly she'd guided through fear. Was this her reward? To be treated as less than human because of her skin? The phone cameras kept rolling, capturing every second. But even as the crowd grew restless, no one moved forward. Fear anchored them in place, and Grant knew it. He sneered, his hand flexing like he was ready to strike again. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, not from weakness, but from the weight of injustice pressing down like a crushing hand. She wasn't just hurt. She was exposed, vulnerable, alone. But she wasn't alone, because at that very moment, through the chaos of shouts and the crackling tension, another presence cut through the noise like thunder rolling across the sky. Jordan. He had been across the street, finishing a meeting with a youth group he mentored, when he saw the commotion. At first he didn't understand. But then he caught sight of Maya, his sister, her face red, her body trembling. The officer looming over her. Something inside him snapped. The Marine in him calculated the scene instantly. The officer's stance, the crowd's hesitation, the danger escalating by the second. But the brother in him felt only one thing, rage. Not the reckless kind, but the kind born from years of watching his sister fight against a world that never gave her what she deserved. He started toward them, every step deliberate, his presence slicing through the crowd like a blade. People instinctively stepped aside, sensing the storm building. Grant turned, noticing the movement, but by then it was too late. Jordan was already there, his shadow falling over the man who had just raised his hand against Maya. The air tightened, the crowd hushed, and in that suspended second, before the first word was spoken, before the first move was made, one truth became clear: the cop thought he had silenced Maya, but now he would face someone who could not be silenced. Jordan's shadow fell across the officer like a storm cloud blotting out the sun. The crowd, buzzing with outrage and fear, went silent as they realized something was about to break. Maya, clutching her cheek, looked up through blurred vision and saw her brother, her protector, standing tall, unflinching, his eyes locked on the man who had struck her. Officer Grant's lips curled into a smirk, the kind of smug grin that came from years of unchecked power. He barked, "Back up! This doesn't concern you." His hand twitched toward his holster, a silent threat that sent a ripple of fear through the bystanders. Phones trembled in recording hands. Mothers pulled their children closer. Everyone knew what could happen next. But Jordan didn't flinch. His chest rose and fell steadily, his muscles coiled with the discipline of a soldier who had been trained for moments exactly like this. He didn't see a badge. He saw the man who had humiliated his sister in front of the world. Grant stepped closer, puffing himself up, trying to intimidate. His voice roared, "One more step and you're under arrest!" And then he made his mistake. With the eyes of dozens of witnesses locked on him, he shoved Jordan hard in the chest. The force should have sent him back, but Jordan didn't budge. He stood like a wall of iron, his boots anchored to the pavement. The crowd gasped. The balance of power shifted in that single moment. Grant's face reddened. His hand snapped down to his holster. The crowd screamed. Maya's heart stopped. In that breathless second, time seemed to slow. Jordan moved. His hand shot out, faster than the officer could draw, grabbing Grant's wrist in a grip so unyielding the man winced. Gasps erupted as Jordan twisted, forcing the weapon hand harmlessly away. The crowd roared, no longer silent but alive with electricity. For once, the officer wasn't in control. He was the one being restrained. Grant struggled, but Jordan's grip was unbreakable, his eyes blazing with the fury of a man who had watched enough injustice to last a lifetime. He leaned in, his voice low, trembling with restrained rage. "You will never touch her again." The phones caught it all. The fist, the shove, and now, the moment the bully was disarmed by the very man he thought he could overpower. The crowd's outrage turned into chants, their voices rising as hope cracked through fear. For the first time, the cop wasn't feared. He was exposed, and the world was watching. Dear audience, where are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments. The chaos gradually settled. Officer Grant, no longer in control, was surrounded by bystanders recording every moment, each camera a witness to the truth. The local authorities arrived moments later, but the story had already unfolded, clear and undeniable. Maya, still trembling, looked at her brother, her eyes a mix of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. Jordan helped her steady herself, his presence a shield that went beyond the physical, a reassurance that justice could be immediate, personal, and powerful. But beyond that afternoon's adrenaline and fear, something deeper shifted in Maya. She realized that her courage had never been absent. It had been waiting, anchored in love and family, ready to rise when the world pushed too far. For the first time in her life, she felt the full weight of support, the knowledge that she did not have to endure injustice silently. The humiliation that had been inflicted on her, the punch that had cut not just her face but her dignity, had met its equal. She was seen. She was protected. And the man who had assumed his power could intimidate a black woman publicly had been brought to his knees, both literally and metaphorically. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispers of admiration and outrage mingling in the streets. Social media exploded. Videos circulated, sparking conversations, debates, and awareness. Maya's story became a mirror reflecting countless others who had been silenced, ignored, or abused because of the color of their skin. And in that reflection, millions saw themselves, the fear, the anger, the fight, and the hope for change. But the lesson was more profound than a single act of heroism. It was a reminder that oppression thrives when bystanders remain silent, when power is misused without consequence. Yet it also showed that courage, whether in the form of a witness, a family member, or someone who refuses to accept injustice, can alter the course of a moment, and perhaps even a life. Maya returned home that evening, forever changed but not broken. Her cheek still bore the faint mark of the assault, a scar that spoke of survival rather than defeat. She knew the world would not always be fair, and that her battles were far from over. But she also knew that standing up, calling out injustice, and protecting one another could tilt the balance, even in a world weighted against her. And so the question remains, not just for her, but for all of us watching. How long will we allow prejudice to thrive in silence? How many more Mays, how many more victims must face hatred before the world truly sees? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.